So, guys, George W. Bush. I might throw up a little bit in my mouth before I finish this sentence, so bear with me. Let's see if I get through it. George W. Bush. Okay, I'm all right. You know what? Lucy's in my lap. That's why I'm getting through this. George W. Bush didn't throw up in my mouth. Proud of that. Is in my area. He's in my neighborhood. Just about. Almost. Still didn't throw up in my mouth. Yesterday, he was in Beverly Hills. Today, which is not my neighborhood, by the way. I do not live in Beverly Hills. People are like, Rod lives in Beverly Hills. I do not. I live in San Pedro. It's, I want to say if there was the opposite of Beverly Hills in Los Angeles proper, it would be San Pedro. I feel like that's a fair, one of the neighborhoods at least would be San Pedro. It's a lot different than Beverly Hills. And I prefer San Pedro by a lot over Beverly Hills. Anyway, so tonight, George W. Bush is in Long Beach, which is a lot closer to me being in San Pedro. I don't know. Part of me is thinking about going down there, protesting outside. I can guarantee you guys I'm not going to get inside. It is at minimum $200 to get in. I don't have that kind of money to spend on George W. Bush. I don't think there's any event I'd pay $200 to get in. I really don't. Unless it involves somebody rising from the dead. If Kurt Cobain rose from the dead, it was like Nirvana's playing one night only, $200. I'd be like, yeah, I would pay $200 to see Zombie Kurt and Nirvana play, or Zombie Jim Morrison, or Zombie John Lennon and George Harrison, or Zombie Janis Joplin, or Zombie Amy Winehouse, Zombie Hendrix. I'd pay some bucks to see them. But not George W. Bush. Not any. There's no politician I'd pay $200 to see. I've seen Bernie quite a few times. It was free every single time, by the way, just for the record. But George W. Bush is in the area. And last night, Mike Prysner, some of you guys probably already know who Mike Prysner is. He is a veteran for peace. He has the Eyes Left podcast. And he is a veteran and an activist and a socialist for peace. And he collaborates with Abby Martin. They do a lot of amazing work together. And he got into the event last night. I don't know how he got in. I don't know if he paid. I don't know what the deal was. But he did get in. And check out this video. And for everyone listening to the podcast later, you're listening to this video. Check this out.
He's got a lot of really smart people at his disposal. And I used them. My dad used them.
First of all, before we get into Mike's part here, just in case you couldn't hear what GW was saying, he was saying how the president has a lot of very smart people at his disposal. The president he's referring to, I'm assuming, is Joe Biden. That's code for, hey, we're all a bunch of warmongers. When George W. Bush, one of the biggest war criminals of all time, George W. Bush, one of the biggest war criminals of all time, among the biggest war criminals in the world, him and his administration, Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, Bush, the neocon agenda, the Halliburton agenda. They sold wars to the American people with the help of the media. And the plan was to just set the Middle East on fire, one country at a time, to pad the profits of the defense contractors and at the behest of oil companies. And we're still on our freaking knees because of it. They sent in the axis of evil, the neocon agenda. The American people bought it. And we're still reeling from the effects of it. That was the Bush administration. George W. Bush is a war criminal among war criminals. He resets the bar of what it means to be a freaking war criminal. And he surrounded himself with some of the worst cretins of humanity. And he put a nice face on it. He said, oh, it seems like someone I want to get a beer with. As he's bombing the hell out of innocent people around the world and ruining the lives of Americans at home. So that's telling that he's patting Biden on the back and the people who surrounded by Biden. That's really telling that the war machine gets what they want, whether there's a Wall Street sponsored R in office or a Wall Street sponsored D in office. They get what they frickin' want. And it's the same people calling the shots. And George W. Bush was a warmonger. And Obama kept it all on autopilot. He was a warmonger too. And Trump kept it all on autopilot. He was a warmonger too. And Biden's another warmonger. So that's telling. He's surrounded by great people, according to George W. Bush. That's assuring. So let's get to Mike's part here, folks. Here he goes.
But it was awesome to have him alive. And Mother, of course, was around too. And she had
Mr. Bush, when are you going to apologize for the million Iraqis that are dead because you lied? You lied about weapons of mass destruction. You lied about connections to 9/11. You lied about Iraq being a threat. You sent me to Iraq. You sent me to Iraq in 2003. My friends are dead. Joshua Castile. You killed people. You lied. You lied about WND. A million Iraqis are dead because you lied. My friends are dead because you lied. You need to apologize. Apologize. Apologize.
Are you with this gentleman? No. No.
You know, one of the things
they booed him. And look at all these people. These people. Nobody stood up. At least no one in this video stood up in Mike's defense. Instead, if you overheard, George W. Bush said, you promised you were going to behave yourself. That's what George W. Bush said. And people started laughing as he's talking about his friends who died. His friends who died in Iraq. The millions of innocent Iraqis who died. George W. Bush made a joke, and people laughed in his face. Mike Prysner, a veteran who has dedicated himself to peace, who has shared what he's been through as a veteran. They're laughing in his face. Not one person. Now, in fairness, like I mentioned before, chances are everyone in that building paid about $200 to be in there. And they make it that way on purpose. Why? Because if they didn't, chances are about half the audience or more would be a bunch of Mike Prysners. If it was a free event and it was George W. Bush, I think we could safely say most of the people there would be in protest. But, you know, you up the ante, then it's only the people in his corner who are going to be able to show. That's by design, folks. That's by design. But I was amazed that nobody stood up for him. Not one person. And they booed him and they laughed at him when he was saying, my friends are dead. And they were applauding him here. There's like 3 seconds more of this. Let's watch the final 3 seconds.
Gentlemen, is she coming with him or is she with you?
They wanted to know if the person was with him because they probably wanted to kick her out too. They're probably, if the person filming was with Mike Prysner, because they probably wanted to kick them out too. And this is California, by the way. This is the supposed progressive utopia. Now, again, I know that most people paid a lot of money to be in there, so it's a skewed sample size. But isn't that amazing? A veteran. Don't you love it when you go around and you see those support our troops banners everywhere? I bet a lot of those people in that audience probably have support our troops in their front lawn. Andy Andrist, he's a comedian out of Eugene, Oregon. He has an amazing bit. It might still be his opener. And it's on film. So it's like, like this is publicly available comedy. Just so like I'm not, but he has a great bit. I'm not going to do the bit, but he has a great bit about quote supporting the troops. You got to see it. Look it up. If you type in Andy Andrist support the troops, it should come up. It's available online, and it's a brilliant bit about quote unquote supporting the troops. So George W. Bush, that guy shouldn't be able to go out anywhere in public. He shouldn't be able to. He can't travel. Why? Because he's a freaking war criminal. The guy is a war criminal. And here in the supposed progressive utopia of California, a veteran speaks out against him and his lies, which, by the way, everyone knows this about George W. Bush. Everyone knows that Bush lied. Everyone knows there were no weapons of mass destruction. In a veteran, they laugh him out of the room and boo him out of the room instead of booing George W. Bush out of the room. How can you say, like, the United States isn't the most war propagandized nation on earth. We are. We are. And, you know, I know there was like a big debate kind of going on online about like what patriotism means and are you a patriot? And I'm not. I get the argument on saying like what, like redefining what it means to be a patriot, but I see what this country is all about and what it has been all about for a very, very long time. And no, I am not a patriot. I am not a patriot. I do not believe in the quote American way. Because the American way is exploit the planet for ourselves, dog eat dog, hyper individualism on steroids. You know, it's just you get ahead no matter the cost. There's no obligation to community. There's no obligation for the betterment of society. There's no obligation to the environment. There's no obligation to provide a quality of life to the people who live in your country. And in fact, the whole government, the whole society is built on how can we exploit people? Let's have crushing economic conditions so people have no choice but to join the military where we're going to exploit them with the help of a military-friendly, war propaganda-friendly media, which has been the case since the frickin' 60s at the very least, probably goes back even further than that. We're going to sell them these lies that they're doing something good around the world. Meanwhile, really, they're just helping out a bunch of oil tycoons, a bunch of oil propagandists, and a bunch of defense contractors. That's what all of this has always been about. We have built a completely unsustainable economy of war that cannot continue. Not only is it morally disgusting around the world and has cost thousands and thousands and millions, rather, of innocent lives around the world and continues to, but it's also completely unsustainable. Every empire falls the same way. We will be no different. And it exploits the people at home, too. And it's the reason we have this declining quality of life. The American quality of life has declined just in my lifetime. If my wife and I decided to have kids tomorrow, we would not be able to give those kids the same chance that I had, that she had. And nobody can, unless you're really, if you're really rich, that's different. But unless you're really rich, you can't do that. You can't, you're like, I want to give my kid better than how I had it. Okay, you can do that if you leave the country. You can't do that in the United States unless you're really fucking rich. That's the only way you can do that. And even if you are really rich, well, you don't know if freaking bullets are going to be flying in a school. By the way, there was another school shooting today. There was another school shooting today. Oh, and we're not keeping our kids safe at school, by the way, because a quarter of every new COVID case is coming from our school kids. A quarter of all the new cases are our school kids. We're not keeping them safe at school, which should come as anything but surprising, because for over 20 years, bullets have been flying in the classrooms, and we've done nothing about that. So the United States does not care about your children. They do not care about you. They do not care about community. They do not care about society. They care about defense contractors. They care about big pharma. They care about oil companies. And that's it. And you still, despite all that, have a room full of people who will boo a veteran who has dedicated his life to fighting this absolutely repulsive status quo and has brought stories to the world, around the world, putting his own health and safety on the line. Abby Martin, Mike Prysner, they have done that constantly. He will get booed out of a room full of people. Well, George W. Bush is celebrated. Well, his jokes are laughed at. That's funny. Oh, you promised you were going to behave. Ha, 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 ha. That's what the United States is. That's not a pile of dirt and soil I'm proud to be from. So, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people who, you know, like they arrange the terms differently and they say that they're, you know, they are patriots. I know some of you guys are bringing up Jackson Hinkle. Jackson's a good guy. This is not in any way a dig at him. I mean, I saw a lot of that on Twitter. He was not the only person tweeting about that. A bunch of other people were too. That's just my perspective on it. This is no way a dig at him or anybody else. I've never even, I haven't watched his videos on the topic, but man, it really, it's sad that I don't live in a place where more people don't watch the video that we just watched or listen to it later for everyone checking out the podcast. And it really boils their fucking blood. Instead of either apathy or a shrug, or in worst cases, like all the people in that room, just indifference, or you're booing at him or laughing in his face. I want to live in a country where more people in that room would have stood up with him. Where more people in that room would have, or maybe, hey, more people would have said, hey, let's hear what he has to say. Let's hear what he has to say. Don't silence him. This is a veteran. This is a veteran who was affected big time by what the man on stage did. That man on stage, he did that. And there's no doubt. The people in that room, they know. George W. Bush had a 23% approval rating when he left office. Everyone knew what he was. But we live in the United States of amnesia, where if you have a couple nice appearances on Ellen and you have a nice paint by numbers book, everyone forgets that you're a fucking war criminal. Well, I'm sick of living in that country. That's not a country that anybody should be fucking proud of, because it's sick. We are the most propagandized nation on earth, and I'm sick of it. I mean, I'm considered something controversial. You know what I am? I'm a comedian who streams on the internet and has a fucking memory that goes back more than 48 hours. That's what I am. George W. Bush, he was a war criminal. Oh, come on. Don't be a buzzkill. No, he's a fucking war. You don't remember that? I remember that. And by the way, I smoke a lot of pot, and I still remember that. My short-term memory is pretty fucked. For those of you who watch, you should know this with Graham Elwood and myself. I have brain farts on the names of famous actors constantly. Household names that most people, they're like, oh, yeah. I had a brain fart on Clint Eastwood a fucking week ago. So I don't think I'm winning awards for my short-term anytime soon. But I remember George W. Bush, fucking war criminal. It's not that hard. It really isn't that hard. And yeah, if you're on the left in this country, you are still part of the smallest group. It's not as small as we thought it was, but you're still part of the smallest group. So you know how we win? Tell people that they can't read Marx and Stephanie Kelton. That's how we win. That's how we win. Two great ideas, by the way. Let's put them in opposition to each other. That's how we fucking win. Both have tons of application in our contemporary society. Tons. Both have tons of great ideas that will make the lives of regular people better. Let's put them in opposition to each other. That's how we win. What a fucking joke. God damn it. I was looking forward to talking to Jeff today, too. I'll shout out to Mike Prysner. Shout out to Mike Prysner for that, because that was freaking awesome. And let me make sure, Eyes Left is the name of that podcast again. He's also active with the PSL, Party of Socialism and Liberation, and he also works on Empire Files with Abby Martin. Shout out to Mike Prysner for that. I haven't seen Mike in a while, but it's always cool to catch up with him when I see him. And I got to have him on this show. I've never had Mike on this show. I got to have him.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today.